Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the regularly scheduled meeting of the Board of Public Works for today, Wednesday, March 1st, 2017.
Commissioner Rivas, Repenning, James, Davis, and Jacinto are present. President James, we have a quorum. May we start with Bureau introductions, please, starting with Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, Shirley Lau, Bureau of Engineering.
Good morning, John Ollinger, Bureau of Contract Administration.
Good morning, Ruben Flamenco, Bureau of Street Lighting.
Good morning, Lance Awish with the Bureau of Street Services.
Good morning, Mark Starr, Bureau of Sanitation.
Good morning, Ted Jordan, Public Works General Counsel.
Fernando Campos, Executive Officer. President James, we did receive a speaker card under general public comment. We have no commentary under the Neighborhood Council comment section, and we also received speaker cards on items 1, 2, and 3. Also, for the record, we did receive an email comment that was received yesterday, and that has been submitted and transmitted to all commissioners, in addition to prior comments that were submitted to your board on January 18th and also on January 26th.
Okay. Is there a second to my motion that we approve the meeting minutes from the meeting of Friday, February 10th, 2017? By Commissioner Repenning. Any objection? Without objection, we'll approve those meeting minutes. We have one general comment card for general public comment. Dr. Williams on general public comment, sir, go ahead.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council and others. Basically, this week there's been a lot of discussion regarding GIS and how much you guys are spending for your GIS versus planning department and others. My wife, 15 years ago, was in the state fund, and they decided to go paperless. And I said, what are you going to do with the 30% that will be unemployed? So they actually did, and they actually had to lay off a lot of people, but they became far more efficient. Paperless. Rather interesting concept. You have the oil and gas administrator in your offices now. The entire well system of the city of LA is on the digital room. You can go on Dogger and it's all there and it's easily accessible. And might say the public can access almost anything. AQMD helped them become digital because all wells now have, if you rework a well, you have to notify the AQMD. Same way can be done in the city of LA. And one of the issues is who's going to pay for a GIS for roughly 10,000 wells in the city of Los Angeles, and where they go and who they may put at risk. So there's a real problem. We need more GIS. 5 million, how about 10? Double the size and go paperless. That would be an interesting concept. AQMD is trying to do that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. No other general public comment cards. We'll close general public comment. We'll also close the Neighborhood Council category of commentary. Agenda item number 1 in Council District 14, construction order from the Bureau of Engineering to Matthew and Stewart Company, super expedited wastewater emergency rehabilitation for sewers program. That's the 8th Street project. Recommending that the board first authorize a construction budget of a not to exceed amount of $480,000 for the project, and secondly, authorize the city engineer to issue the construction order for the project to Mrca, which stands for Matthew and Stewart Company. Salim Garawi?
Yes, my name is Salim Garawi. I'm with the Bureau of Engineering, Wastewater Conveyance Construction Divisions, the Sewers Group. I'm here for the 8th Street 400C projects. The staff recommends the following. 1, to authorize a construction order of a construction budget of $480,000, which includes about $80,000 in contingency. And number 2, authorize the city engineer to issue the construction order to Matthew and Stewart Company Incorporated. In an overview, the project is located on 8th Street between Olive and Hill. The existing pipe is a 6-inch vitrified clay pipe, about 110 years old. Got offset joints, root intrusions, and hard to maintain by the Bureau of Sanitation. A construction order was issued for the project, which at the time called 8th Street 400B back in 2015, to remove and replace the pipe. However, after initial exploratory work, it was determined that it's not economically feasible to remove and replace the pipe due to the presence of a large storm drain maintenance hole and other utilities that would interfere with the replacement of the new pipe. So consequently, the scope was revised to perform 3 spot repairs and install and do partial realignment by installing 3 maintenance holes with 8-inch vitrified clay pipe around the existing storm drain maintenance hole. This revised scope is outside the scope of Sewers 5 bid items, and therefore a lump sum proposal was requested from the onboard contractors. The 2 contractors work for Sewers 5. Matthew and Stewart Company's bid was the lowest at approximately $400,000. Tomovich and Associates bid was at $2.8 million. For simplicity and for accounting purposes, the scope will be conducted under a new project name, 8th Street 400C, with a new work order number. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garawi. Any questions, Commissioner Cinto, on agenda item number 1?
Thank you, President James. Salim, thank you for this report. Just, the comment on Tomovich's bid and why it was so much higher than Masco's. Can you comment on that? I mean, I'm looking at it right here, and it's amplified. It's just a lot larger in terms of the amounts.
Yeah, not exactly sure. It's about 7 times as much. It's a lot higher. Generally, Tomovich is, even the bid items they submitted is generally more expensive. They do, I'm not sure exactly why it is a lot more expensive. It's the same bid items. However, their overhead seems to be higher than Masco.
Thank you.
Any other questions on this? Commissioner Cinto's made a motion that we adopt agenda item number 1. Seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 1. Any issue sending number 1 forthwith? We'll send number 1 forthwith. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Agenda item number 2 in Council District 4, above ground facility appeal, 801 South Citrus Avenue on the 8th Street side of the lot. Recommending that the board deny Dan Sterling's appeal of the Bureau of Engineering's determination to locate the above ground facility adjacent to 801 South Citrus Avenue on the 8th Street side of the lot. Mr. Liu and Mr. Ledoux, whoever, on agenda item number 2. Do we have a card? Back up. Dr. Williams, I'm sorry. We had a card for you on, it's number 2 that you did not put in a card on. I thought you didn't put in a card on number 1. So, Dr. Williams on agenda item number 1, my apologies.
So for the record, then the board is reconsidering item number 1?
Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead, sir.
Okay. Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, Land Use and Infrastructure Committee also. Basic element, One Water, LA, is a great program, except that one thing. How many miles of pipe do you guys have in the ground right now, and how old is it? Super expedited. That really got my attention because I'm an old sewer rat. Been down in a lot of sewers here in LA as part of the Metro Rail construction downtown. The problem is, how many miles of pipe do you have in the ground? And how many super expedited repairs have you had to do? And especially in the downtown area. So would like to see a map or digital file of all sewers and storm drains in the ground now, their age, and when they were last repaired or relined. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. Just in response, if you'll communicate with our executive officer, Mr. Campos can put you in touch with Michael Cirillo, who oversees the sewers program. We get quarterly reports that come to this board every quarter, where that information is provided to us.
Here's the standard that I go by.
And sir, I'm sorry, we can't, Brown Act, have a discussion back and forth. You were done. So I'm just giving you some information that if you want to get from Mr. Campos, you're happy to. Okay?
Yep. Go Zimas.
Thank you, sir. But for the record, yes, go ahead, Mr. Campos.
I was going to say, since this,
I'm sure I've violated lots of things here, but go ahead.
Since the item has been reconsidered, I will need a new motion in a second also.
Understood. So we have, I was just trying to be helpful there. We have the motion from Commissioner Asento, seconded by Commissioner Davis. Any objection? Without objection, we'll adopt agenda item number 1. Any issue sending number 1 forthwith? We will send number 1 forthwith. Thank you. Agenda item number 2, above ground facility appeal, 801 South Citrus Avenue on the 8th Street side of the lot, recommending that the board deny Dan Sterling's appeal of the Bureau of Engineering's determination to locate the above ground facility adjacent to 801 South Citrus Avenue on the 8th Street side of the lot. Mr. Liu, on agenda item number 2, just for a summary, and then we have the adjacent property owner. I know I have a card from Mr. Sterling, then we'll hear from Mr. Sterling. Dr. Williams does not have a card on number 2, so go ahead, sir.
Good morning. My name is Warren Liu. I'm working for Bureau of Engineering Central District Office. For this AT&T AGF cabinet locations, 801 South Citrus Avenue on 8th Street site. The company for that application is AT&T. Council District number 4, zoning residential. The date applied it was on this November 23rd, 2016. The facility applied it for is one standard AT&T's cabinet, 40.5 inch high by 42.8 inch wide by 19.9 inch deep. The BOE staff conducted a site inspection and concluded there's no alternative site on this block. Appellant for this AGF is Dan Sterling. The appellant's reason for appeal are one is pose a undeniable threat to the home's value, and BOE response to the reason is the municipal code ordinance 62.08 does not take into account the issue of the AGF installation decreasing property value as critical for issuing a permit. The second reason is for the appeal is the cabinet is a magnet for graffiti, trash, and loitering, which responded to as the ordinance requires AGF owners to place a sticker which has contact names and phone number for residents to call to report graffiti or other problems. The reason for the appeal is unknown health risk to their infant son. According to the AT&T, this cabinet is a passive fiber connection point. It is not powered and has no batteries or other form of power or electrical conductivities. AT&T does not believe there's any health-related concerns. And the last reason for the appeal is not create an aesthetically pleasing appearance, which our response is proposed it. AGF cabinet is reviewed it and approved for design by Department of Cultural Affairs. The proposed 5-gallon shrub on each side of the cabinet meant to make it less visible. AT&T can get together with the property owner to pick a shrub. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Liu. We'll hear from Mr. Sterling, and then and we may have additional questions for either you or the property owner. Thank you, sir. Daniel Sterling. Hi.
Hello.
Just so you know, sir, we don't put a time limit on the real parties in interest. So the only thing I ask is that we normally have a 2-minute time limit for speakers. We don't do that here on a real party in interest, which you are. What we do, though, is if you begin to repeat yourself or something, I may step in at that point.
Great.
Okay, go ahead, sir.
I'm very likely to repeat myself as I'm a little bit underslept and I'm unfamiliar with this format. But I guess we'll just start by saying, so we have with us, and I don't know if it's appropriate to present evidence at this hearing, but a lot of evidence of what it looks like in our neighborhood where AT&T's other cabinets have been installed in the blocks surrounding us. And they are, if anybody cares to look, they are magnets for trash and graffiti, as Mr. Liu said, or as he spoke of my concern about it. They're a total visual blight on the neighborhood. And this particular block that we're on is in a neighborhood that we invested in a year ago. It's by any reasonable standard, it's the nicest house on a block that is in a residential neighborhood with emerging values, and it is surrounded by Wilshire Boulevard and car dealerships and strip malls and all these places that seem that are multi-story structures and would visually not be as blighted by this large white cabinet, and which currently is scheduled to be installed on the lawn that we maintain, on the parkway that we maintain. So we just feel that the visual evidence, both for other options for places for them to install it, and for how it is that the city or that that AT&T demonstrates their interest in maintaining the aesthetic appearance of these things. I mean, there's trash sitting on it. There's graffiti. There's stickers on it. This is a very nice house we live in, and it just seems to be an undeniable threat. It seems like it's going to have a deleterious effect on the property of our home, which we went out on a limb we spent more money in this neighborhood than basically anybody else has in terms of this little area. We bought the newest, nicest house on the block, which is, I suppose that's our choice, but we were not expecting it to have this industrial installation planted. Anyway, is there anything that we can do with regard to submitting these photos? Or
You can hand them to the executive officer.
Okay, great. Some of them are photos. There's 2 bunches. I don't know if you can organize them, and I apologize for not.
You can tell us what we're looking at.
Sorry. So one set is, it shows other places, for instance, the BMW dealership that is less than a full block away from us, where it seems to us that a white industrial cabinet would be less visually noticeable, would be less harmful to the look of the place. And then these are cabinets that are very close to us in the neighborhood that are installed by AT&T, One of them, I think, is even outside a building with an AT&T logo on it, and they're you can see. And I think they have the addresses on the back of each photograph. So at minimum, we hope you could understand our alarm at this proposal. Also, we did not see any picture of shrubs nor were we given any detailed plan at all about how this cabinet would be maintained, who would be watering the shrubs. Currently, that is our responsibility and financial burden to maintain that parkway. So nobody's given us any information about health effects, shrubs, anything. We just have no idea what's going on.
Okay. So we'll have a discussion on those items this morning, and we'll get some guidance from our city attorney and the Bureau of Engineering along the way.
Okay.
Okay? Just before I have you take a seat, Mr. Sterling, just to put some of this in context for us. So the first group of photos, we have 3 photos that show generally a commercial area, and these 3 photos that you've provided that show the commercial area, you say are approximately a half a block away from the residence where you live.
Well, at least a block. At least one of them is definitely within one actual block.
Okay.
I'm not remembering. I didn't. There's addresses on the back of all of them.
Okay.
So.
Oh, there's 5070 Wilshire.
Yeah.
Which is 2 of them, and then all 3 of them say 5070 Wilshire.
Well, okay. So, but those are 3 different distinct locations at that.
So there may be 3 different corner areas there.
Yeah.
Okay. And I recognize some of the buildings here. So, okay. And then, so we'll ask the Bureau about that. And then regarding these, this cabinet that you have here with the soda or the smoothie on the top, and the art or graffiti, whatever
I would also ask
somebody
you
wants to
to
call
notice
it.
the detritus at the side of it as well.
Right,
But,
and
yeah.
I see that, and I also see the painting on the sidewalk and the area. Where were these? So this is 600 block of South La Brea, and 730 block of Cloverdale. How far approximately are those from your residence?
Within a couple of blocks. Within a few blocks. We're at 8th, basically, about 3 little blocks east of La Brea. So, and we also took. Well, actually, no, never mind. There's another one that was installed this morning, but that one was we don't have a photograph of. But yeah, so they're within the neighborhood. I don't know what is relevant to the committee with regard to, but they're all AT&T installations, it seems like, and they seem to be a demonstration of how it's the city and the AT&T, and the appearance seems to speak for itself.
Understood.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Is there a representative from AT&T here? Thank you, Mr. Sterling. I'll talk to them now.
Okay, thanks.
Could you pass those back? So I'd like for you to take a look, if you would, at the addresses are on the back of the photographs. And just I'm sorry, I didn't send them this direction. We'll get them sent this direction as well. The addresses on the back, according to Mr. Sterling, are where these cabinets are adjacent. You'll see summarily in the various cabinets some graffiti on the cabinet, and you'll see some graffiti adjacent to the cabinet. What is AT&T's graffiti response, or what would AT&T's response be to the homeowner that's making the claim that based upon these, which granted these are in a commercial corridor, and I'll get to that question in a moment, but these are in a commercial corridor which is somewhat distinguishable from the proposed location, which is in more of a residential corridor. What's your response to that on the commercial corridor?
When we receive a call on a situation like this with graffiti, we respond within 48 hours to either clean it off or repaint. But once we're notified.
Okay. And do you get more calls from residential, from above-ground facilities with your information on it, from residential corridors or from commercial corridors?
I'm not privy to that.
Here's the reason I asked the question. It seems to me that, and this is anecdotally, but if you've got I know from Mr. Sterling's example, perhaps, I can tell from hearing from him. If there's graffiti on Monday, and let's say it goes in outside of his home or anyone like him, if there's graffiti there on Monday, they're going to call on Monday, and you're going to be out within 48 hours, is what you say. Okay.
Yes, sir.
But an above ground facility in a commercial corridor, you don't have someone that lives adjacent to that. Now, people work adjacent to that corridor, and I'm trying to get a sense of, do you get a sense, do people that even though they don't live next to it, do people call it in, adjacent businesses call it in, and more or less in residential versus corridor versus commercial?
It's anecdotally, I would suspect that if it's near a business, it's going to get called less often or less quickly than it would in a residential market. But I don't have any stats to show you.
Okay. Mr. Sterling also presented a photograph of a commercial area, 5070 Wilshire, that's not far from his residence. Would you summarize the review of alternative locations in the area that would be suitable for the work that you need from this apparatus, if you guys did any of that?
What we're trying to do with this project, as with any projects like this one, is we try and locate them in the center of the neighborhood they're serving.
As always.
Right. That's the way the technology works. The technology works to go out from that location, not to operate from the extreme ends or outside the zone. And this area would be outside our zone.
And if I may add,
I'm sorry, the commercial area that's proposed would be outside of the zone?
The Wilshire corridor area is outside our zone. Also, too, we have the specific zone areas that are protected from cabinets being placed, and I believe the Wilshire corridor is one of those, which requires a lot more scrutiny when it comes to getting a permit.
In the Wilshire corridor.
Yes.
So, and the apparatus that's the subject of today's hearing, is that for what type of service is that going to help you provide?
This is our new light gig product. It's what we're calling AT&T fiber, and it takes fiber all the way to the home. By bringing the cabinets in, we bring fiber into the cabinet, and then from the cabinet, we're taking fiber to the poles and distributing through the neighborhoods. And then when people ask for our service, we're taking a fiber line from the pole and taking it right into their house. The services we're going to be able to provide, for example, a high-definition movie, they'll be able to download in 35 seconds. It's very, very fast.
And just if I may add, the product is a residential product as well.
Yeah.
Okay, but when you say the product is residential, what do you mean?
It would need to be wholly enclosed within the residential zone in order for it to be able to maximize its reach out from that specific center line point to all the residences surrounding that community.
Okay. There was another reference made by Mr. Sterling that this concept of shrubbery was not explained to him. What of that issue? Shrubs adjacent to the above-ground facility.
The Department of Cultural Affairs, when we went through the initial approval process, required us, as they have on other projects that we've done, to place a potted plant, a 5-gallon potted plant on either side of our cabinet, which we have historically done for years. And it is and based on the ordinance as well, the AGF ordinance, it is the responsibility for the adjacent property owner to maintain it like they do the parkway today.
Okay, so in the parkway, adjacent to the above-ground facility,
yes,
AT&T provides this greenery item.
Correct.
Okay, and you said you've done this for years for various residential locations, maybe even some commercial ones as well.
That's correct. As long as if there's a green parkway, then we provide a potted plant, and those plants are approved by the city a department which I forget.
And those, as is the parkway, which you pointed out, it's responsibility of the adjacent property owner to maintain it.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Any other questions for AT&T or Mr. Sterling before I move to the Bureau of Engineering? Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you, President James. You had asked questions we would have been able to go over had we had a hearing. We weren't able to have
Thank
a
you.
hearing. So the context of we're basically doing a pre-hearing in the context
Today.
of our general board.
Right,
So
yeah.
it's a little bit more involved, and we appreciate this because this is important for our homeowners and all the affected stakeholders to be able to voice their concerns. So I'm glad we're having this. There's in 62.08, it says the AGF owner is responsible for maintaining the landscape immediately surrounding the installation.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so the AGF owner, that would be AT&T.
Oh.
That's what it says. So that's a clarification to AT&T about who maintains the shrubbery that is placed on either side to mitigate the visual.
It's my understanding that we have an agreement with the city that we don't maintain those.
Mr. Jordan, can I ask you, sir?
I'm not aware of any such agreement. I'm going to speculate now that it may be sort of a practice that has developed that a property owner, particularly in a residential area, who is there every day, does the type of routine maintenance for such landscaping in the parkway around the AGF that they would do for other landscaping that they own. However, your reading of the AGF ordinance is correct, that when push comes to shove, it is the owner of the AGF, in this case AT&T, that would be responsible for maintaining that landscaping. Notwithstanding the fact that, again, I'm going to venture into speculation again, that a practice may have developed where the property owner who happens to be there may voluntarily take on that maintenance responsibility. Watering is an issue. If there's watering going on in the lawn that the property owner maintains, that water is probably also watering the landscaping that's been planted.
In the parkway.
In the parkway. So I think for those reasons, my speculation is probably correct, that just through sort of custom and practice, the property owners have done that. But if that landscaping were to die, it would be the AGF owner's responsibility to put something back. Because ultimately, under the 6208, it is the AGF owner's responsibility for that landscaping. And to make matters very clear, we can ensure that any permit, if one is to be issued on this case, we can emphasize that in the permit.
I would support that provision, given that it is in the ordinance. And there's a difference between practice and versus what's in the ordinance. And, we are fulfilling the ordinance.
I would only mention, because in practice, and we have Mr. Lorenzen here, who's here for the next hearing, the parkways, Mr. Lorenzen, the responsibility for maintaining parkways in the city remains with? Yes. So the adjacent property owner. So it just makes sense that if you've got some shrubs that are in the parkway that, as Mr. Jordan points out, that the parkway is being maintained in water, that those shrubs are going to be maintained in water. However, as Commissioner Jacinto points out, the ordinance places the responsibility on, in this circumstance, AT&T. I don't know, Mr. Jordan, if the ordinance might be worthy of some clarification, because obviously the city wants to have the ability to require, in case the adjacent shrubbery falls into disrepair, to require the applicant hear the permit, or hear the applicant, but otherwise the permitted party, to maintain it. And the way we do that is an ordinance like this. But a practice has developed where most times folks are just going to take care of it because they want to, and it's part of the parkway, which they're responsible for anyway.
Yes, well, I think the municipal code in this case happens to be clear. We can always make the clear more clear. We do have a revision to the AGF ordinance pending before the City Council that we've transmitted. I'd be happy to take a look at that ordinance and see if any further clarification on that point.
In this area, it might be. This is what might be clear to some, maybe it could be clearer to others.
Certainly.
Okay. Regarding the Bureau of Engineering, Mr. Ledoux or Mr. Louis, the one? Thank you, gentlemen. Anybody else have any questions for AT&T before I have them? Oh, one moment. Commissioner Rivas has a question for AT&T before we move to BOE.
You mentioned, this proposed AGF is in the center of a zone. Like, how big are those zones? Is it a radius or,
It encompasses between 300 to 500 homes, if that
Okay.
that
So
helps.
and this is like the center of it?
As close to the center as
As
we can
close
get,
as you
where
can.
we can access the poles that provide us with the network.
But a block would really throw that off? If it's 300 to 500
Well,
homes? I guess I don't
If
understand.
we were to shift sideways on 8th, then we could still access the network that we need to. But if we were to take it down to Wilshire, it completely takes us out of the network.
Oh, okay. And then for the Mr. Sterling mentioned other cabinets in the area that weren't, either had graffiti or stickers. Do you wait until someone calls, or is there someone that, like, for instance, our Office of Community Beautification has contractors that go into neighborhoods, and when they see graffiti, they take care of it, even if we don't, if a resident doesn't call. Do you wait, is there a special number on the AGF?
On the AGF that we're installing has a decal on it that gives a number to call. The older cabinets, they might or they might not have it. But our policy is with the older cabinets that we have out there that have been there for a long time, is when our technicians go to that cabinet to do work, if it's in bad condition, they either turn it in or depending on the level of issue, they either clean it up themselves or they turn it in to be cleaned up by a contracted crew.
Okay.
That's a standard. If I can mention, since we're talking graffiti, our existing cabinet that we are installing, like I said, it does have a decal on who to call, but it is also painted with a anti-graffiti surface. It's baked in at the factory. It's not something we paint. It's part of the process of building this thing. And it only requires a damp cloth to remove the graffiti. And I've seen that work, and it does.
And we've heard about that before. How long has that been being installed in the city?
Since about 2005, when we started our UVerse project, that's when we first saw cabinets arrive with that product.
Okay. Any other questions for AT&T? Commissioner Davis.
In terms of the appellant's suggestion of the commercial property where hopefully the apparatus could be considered, you said that takes you out of the epicenter of where you need to be. Is there any other area other than the current location where in fact it could be placed and still be within the confines of what you need to be able to do the job?
It's a good question. Part of what we look for is we worked with the AGF ordinance now for over a decade, so we're really familiar with it. And we have fielders that go out and locate our cabinets in locations that comply. For example, we can't be 45 feet from the apex of the corner of a street. We can't be 25 feet to the right of a driveway or 15 feet to the left of a driveway. We can't.
That's for sight lines, right?
Correct. And we can't put them in front of homes or doorways or side doors or walkways or gates. There's a whole lot of things that we work with.
Put them on the side of homes, but not in the front of homes, correct?
Ideally, that's what we try and do, is put them on the sides.
Could we put it at the house next door on the side?
Well, I've got pictures of the whole neighborhood in front of each house if you'd like to see them. But basically, their neighbors to the immediate right, it's the front of their home that faces 8th Street. So that neighbor's out of commission.
What happened if we put it on the side of their home?
Well, the side of their home is on the next side street, and that's really kind of like the front of their home too. It's one of those homes with an odd shape. Across the street, there are doors and windows as well, and then up the street and around, the same situation.
Compared to this property, which you are putting it outside of what is a wall.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Ledoux? Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Did you provide your names for our record? I'm sorry. It's for.
Noel Palace and John Johnston.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ledoux, could you, as you've done so many times in these hearings, walk us through briefly just kind of what the Bureau does in working with the applicant in reviewing what other alternative sites might be? Why is this, in the Bureau's recommendation, the chosen site for this apparatus? I recognize that it's in a parkway. It's not outside somebody's front door or front window. There's a wall there. It's not in a driveway or near a driveway. There's no sightline issue, and none of those arguments are made here. Is there anything else that hasn't been in the record yet?
Just for the record, my name is Jeff Ledoux, work with BOE Central District. As my colleague said, we did do a site visit out there to see what the logistics and aesthetics were on that particular block. I have an overhead photo, and according to what it shows me, as we get off that block to the block on either side of that, we're still in residential housing. You have to go a full block away, at least on one side, before you hit that commercial area. Basically, like I said, what we look for is how visible it is to the property, what obstacles are there on this block, such as sewer catch storm drain catch basin, trees, driveways, windows, walkways, and fire hydrants, all that good stuff. What we found is that the house directly across from the proposed site, it is the front of that lot. So we steered clear of that. The house that is adjacent, there's actually two homes there that's on the same side of the street, and it's the front of both of those houses. The other lot has a nice green parkway, and evenly spaced are major trees. There's no way to get out from under the root system of all those trees. Whereas the property that's being proposed, it is the side. The cabinet is being placed away from the house itself against a block wall, and there's no real landscaping impediments such as large trees, storm drains, and other things on that side. So on that particular block, which composed 4 lots, it was the only one that really was viable.
Okay. Any other questions for Mr. Ledoux? Commissioner Repenning?
What can you tell us about the average, I would say, condition of boxes that are placed, either the functional ones or the ones that are no longer in operation? Because, you know, these photos make it hard when we have someone coming to appeal the placement of one of these in front of their home. And we're looking at photos of, and I understand, you know, graffiti happens and we deal with it every day. So I understand that it's something that we deal with as a city. But some of these, clearly, it's beyond a matter of just graffiti.
There are 2 types of AT&T cabinets that I basically encounter out in the field. There are the older ones that are mostly prior to the ordinance, where they have their copper lines going into it which service your landline phones. Those do not have anti-graffiti coating, and in my 10 years of looking them out in the field, they're poorly maintained. I've always made no bones about that. The other type of cabinet is this particular program, which is the light gig, and the other one, which they call the Lightspeed cabinet. Those cabinets do have the anti-graffiti coating. They are newer compared to the copper line cabinets, and they do have a sticker on them that's supposed to have a current phone number that you can contact, and are easily cleaned off with certain fluids that AT&T says that they have, and a cloth, whereas the older cabinets have do not have that anti-graffiti coating, and essentially once they're graffitied, it's hard to get it off. It's easier to repaint the cabinet, and after a while you get a splotchy old-looking cabinet. That's what I have found in the field. So basically the Lightspeed and the Lightgate cabinets can be maintained. The older ones are much more problematic.
One more question. We just have the photo of basically the 4 homes. So I don't have a sense of how far this location is from a commercial corridor. Is it 1 block, 2 blocks?
I would have to look. I can show you the photo I have before me that shows that the blocks on either side of it appear to be single-family residents.
The homeowner's indicating he's 1 block away from what, Wilshire Boulevard, Mr. Sterling?
Yeah.
From Wilshire. 8th and Citrus? Yeah, yeah.
And I don't know if AT&T mentioned it, this particular program is not geared at all to commercial property. It's strictly a homeowner or residential product. And we tend to have the installations placed where they're going to be utilized.
My question is, in terms of service, how much does a block matter? I mean...
That you would have to ask AT&T. I am not a technical person.
Okay. I'd like to ask.
Yes. Gentlemen, either one of you or both of you, whatever you prefer. Because in addition to Commissioner Repenning's question about how much does a block matter, on top of that I would ask, what does AT&T do if the permit is denied for this property? Go ahead.
Well, first of all, this box will serve between 300 to 500 residents. That's what our goal is on this one.
But how much does a block matter?
It's the design of the existing aerial feed. It's kind of like it branches from a central point and goes down legs. Well, heading towards Wilshire is just 1 leg, and it doesn't reach all the way to Wilshire. It stops at the end of the residential. So, and it's in a backyard. So for us to, and if we're playing along with the scenario here, if we were to put a cabinet on the side of a business on Wilshire, if we could even get a permit there, we would have to dig through somebody's backyard to access that pole. Otherwise, we would have to trench down the entire block to start where we're trying to start it. I hope that makes sense from a technical point of view. We could put a cabinet outside the area, but to access the network, we would have to either trench a whole lot tear a lot of street up, or we'd have to go through somebody's backyard, which is extremely problematic. Is that?
Hey, Commissioner Davis?
Since this is a problem of practice, given the fact that we have a problem with this particular equipment being in that yard, where would you alternatively put it?
There's a good chance that my company would back away from the neighborhood and wouldn't serve it.
Okay. And what will that mean to the neighborhood?
They won't have this product available to them.
In terms of design, you made a reference to that. The way we designed this area, it was designed so it would be at this location. Is there an option to go back and revisit the structure of design and to design it in a different way?
Not really, because we're using the existing poles and easements that were granted when these homes were built. So in this neighborhood, the majority of the poles go down between properties in the backyards. For us to completely radicalize and change that design that we have to work with would be cost prohibitive, and we probably would not pursue that.
So when you say not really, there is a potential that it could be redesigned, but you think that it would be more costly than the alternative that's been presented?
Yes, sir.
And how much more costly would it be?
I don't have the background to speculate on that.
And what would make it costly?
The fact that we would have to trench down every single street. We would have to place, either trench or place poles on the street. So we'd have to get permission from the city to place poles on the street in addition to the poles for power that are in the backyard, which would be hard to do. If we were to trench and do this underground, We'd have to place handholds in the parkways at every other house, and then we would have to convince the property owners to trench from their home to the street, which presents a logistical issue as well.
So now, alternatively, you testified that, in fact, if we were to put the equipment on the commercial property, that we would simply just have to do what? You've just explained to me what we'd have to do in residential. However, refresh my memory on what we would have to do if we put it in the residential property on Wilshire. We wouldn't have to do the same thing, it would be less.
First of all, if I can go back to the idea of putting it along adjacent to a Wilshire business.
Correct.
We have the Wilshire corridor.
And we would do less infrastructure implementation to make that work than we would have had to do in your last testimony in terms of a residential property, correct?
I'm not following your question, sir.
Your
I'm sorry.
answer to your most recent answer, your most immediate answer to my question about an alternative in the residential, you told me at least a litany of at least 6 things that you'd have to do to make the system work.
Right.
Conversely, when I asked earlier, or when it was asked by a commissioner earlier about implementing the system in a residential, in a commercial property, the things that we had to do there were less. Is that correct? To make the system work?
Well,
less than, let me be very specific. It would be less things to make it functional in this circumstance, in the commercial property, if we relocated it, than it would be in the answer you just gave me in the residential. So it would be less in the commercial, is what I'm saying.
yes, if we could even get a permit to place it adjacent to a Wilshire
So
business.
it would be less costly in the commercial area, correct?
Compared to redesigning the entire
in the
neighborhood.
residential.
Yes.
Okay. So then it would appear to me that the possibility to be explored, if in fact we would want to try to work in the best interest of some of the appellants' concerns, would be to look at the commercial possibility of implementing this device there and looking at the cost, which we've already determined conceptually is a little less than it would be to try to implement this thing in another location within a residential area, according to your testimony, right?
What would be required of us to place it next to a Wilshire corridor location and to make this work would require us to trench an entire block to a central location where we could distribute our cable, or we would
You told me earlier it was the back, you'd have to trench through the backyard.
or we would have to go to the closest home and trench through their backyard from the front to get it to that first pole,
When
which
you
is
say
not
the
which is
front,
not a practical option.
I'm trying to get clear here. Backyard and front. Explain the difference between that to me. If we're going to trench, are we trenching in the backyard or are we trenching in the front?
Front.
Okay. Now, you told me earlier the backyard. You'd have to trench to the
Sir,
back.
there's 2 options if we were to place it on adjacent to a
There are
Wilshire
2
corridor
options
building.
now.
As
Explain
I,
those 2 options to me.
as I state-
Option A would be what?
As I stated earlier, the first option would be to trench down the city block through the residential neighborhood
That would be option A for my purposes.
and
Okay.
bring it to a central location similar to where we are today,
Okay, so that's
wanting to
option,
place.
that's A.
Okay?
Okay, explain option B to me.
Option B would to go from that same cabinet location through the front yard of a piece of property,
So the backyard is out of the question now.
through the front yard into the backyard to reach a pole, so we could get access to our neighborhood. That's not an easy task to do, as others will attest, when it comes to getting easements.
It would be easier than option A, though, wouldn't it be?
No, it would not.
So going down a block would be easier?
Of the 2 options, logistically, that would be easier.
Okay, and what would it be less costly?
Option A would be more costly.
So then, even though option B is difficult, it's less costly.
Option B is probably impossible. I cannot imagine a single city property owner that would allow us to trench through their front yard into their backyard to access our pole. Historically, we don't typically get people to volunteer for that.
And so finally, there are absolutely no other particular alternatives that could occur to provide service to this community, notwithstanding the location that we're currently talking about. If we were looking at this problem of practice and we were trying to decide how could we provide service in this neighborhood and not touch this particular property. It's just totally impossible that that could be done.
That is our view, and we have had scenarios in other neighborhoods where we felt the same way and had to walk away.
That's so difficult to understand.
Well, but
It's
you can
disappointing to
you can
us.
walk away though, right? You're not required to put this there.
That's correct.
You can walk away and say it's not cost efficient for us, and we're sorry, but this neighborhood didn't work out. We're going to go over here.
Yes, sir.
And if you do that, does that interrupt the building of your infrastructure in other areas?
No, it does not.
So that would
So
be
they don't have to do it. I mean, that's part of my point here. Is as difficult as it is to put this above ground facility in this area for the reasons that this homeowner has stated. You're not going to be able to. We don't want you cutting into the street. For one thing, to trench all the way out to Wilshire Boulevard. Number two, I in our practice, and we can't get easements for folks when we want to. When the city's going to pay for something, they're not going to. I can imagine that somebody's going to just voluntarily say, "Sure, trench up my yard," and put the above ground facility on Wilshire Boulevard. At which point, at some time, it becomes cost prohibitive for you. So you just close the book on this neighborhood, so they don't get the service, and you move on.
Yes, sir.
And for all of those reasons, as unattractive as this is, I lean towards granting the permit, but I think that you ought to talk to the homeowner about the mitigation measures, which are the shrubs and the type of material that is painted on it that would that would make it easier for removal of graffiti, and the willingness to, if it does become a graffiti magnet, the willingness for a quicker response. I mean, I also agree with Commissioner Repenning on this. The homeowner presents a compelling case that these cabinets are not being well maintained, and I just know his argument that if we put this cabinet here, it's not only going to attract graffiti and smoothie cups and other stuff that's going to sit there, and so it's a real tough. I hate to turn away service for the 500 folks that live there too, because that may affect their property values. Commissioner Davis?
Certainly in the course of business, we believe in the free market, and certainly, AT&T should thrive along with your colleagues in the business. But do neighborhoods have an option if they really feel deeply that it matters to them with regard to their property value? And I respect what you do and how you do it, and I want you to do it, and yet I respect the right of the residents who have oftentimes problems as it relates to their very own property. And I don't want to lessen the respect for them at the expense of anyone else equally. So my question to you as a corporate representative, do neighborhoods have a choice if they decide that for us and our property, it just really presents a problem and we'd like to opt out? Do they have that choice? Question for you.
In regards to where the cabinet is located, the AGF ordinance allows there to be an appeal process where it goes to the commissioner and then it comes here to the full board. So there is that option provided by the city's ordinance when it comes to that, and we are very sensitive to it and we're open to it. We have had discussions. We have had discussions with homeowners and property owners apart from that process, and have made moves. In fact, we've got a couple right now that the first letter of notification as part of the AGF ordinance is sent from us to the property owners, letting them know what's coming, and if they have any questions or concerns, to call us. And they have done so. And we have gone out and we have said, we see what you're saying. We agree with you. How about if we slide this down your parkway to the far end or to another location? And we have worked with them before it even makes it to the commissioner's hearing.
Let
So
me
we are
ask you
willing to
this.
do that.
Has there been a neighborhood that has opted out and just decided that they didn't want the service and they're comfortable with that?
No,
There has not been a neighborhood that has done that.
not as a neighborhood, no.
Reflecting back to your recent testimony that you've worked with neighbors to move it down, have you attempted to do that with these particular residents who are presenting as appellants today?
They would have received a letter from us, and I'm not aware that
Would
they...
that be yes or would that be no? Have you worked with this particular
No.
couple?
They have not reached out directly to us
So
to
no,
ask
you
that they
have
were
not yet.
interested in.
Are you willing to explore the possibility to see if you could get to a more comfortable position of a mutual resolution that is not only satisfied to your corporation but is satisfactory to them? Are you willing to explore that possibility?
We always are, yes. We are willing to. Normally that happens after the commissioner hearing.
I would feel more comfortable because I really do feel uncomfortable right now.
If I just may add something on
I
that,
really
we
do.
definitely would feel comfortable, and we are definitely always amenable to working with the property owner if they are also willing to agree to move it within the location where we don't have to change the notification pattern on this, and thereby create a new application for this application.
It's a two-sided street there. And I don't know if Mr. Sterling is willing to move it on his property, which is what you're talking about. I think you might be talking about two different things. Maybe I'm wrong, but Commissioner Davis is talking about moving it off of their property, and we've had that discussion today.
Correct.
Would Mr. Sterling, are you willing to? Is there another position on your parkway or in your property that would be more suitable than what is being proposed? Well, we'll ask that question.
Yeah, that was one of my earlier questions, which was in terms of relocating it, could there be another location? And obviously, we've not asked anyone else in the neighborhood about that. But it would appear to me that that would be worth exploring as you review this issue.
What of the parkway across the street?
Across the street, it's the front of their house, I think.
There are issues with regards to, we need to
Oh,
abide
Mr.
by-
Sterling is saying yes, that's the case. Yeah. Okay, thank you. I didn't have the map.
So, right then, that's no other alternative. That's no other alternative.
Oh, they're all fronts.
Did you have the hearing?
And if I may
Having it
add
right
just
now.
one
we're having it.
last point with regards to
This is
considering
it.
a location across the street from the center pole that we would be trying to do is the point that
This is the neighbor's
President
house?
James had indicated. If we go across the street, then it would definitely obviously require trenching, and we'd have to look into compromising the street by trenching into it to cut across it to get to the pole where we need to be at. That's why, as practice, we generally like to consider the same side of the street of the pole where we're going to be accessing it from.
There's also a complication for cost, just for the record, for AT&T. If they cut into the street, they're required to repave it from, because of the moratorium, from point to point. That could add additional costs, and that's why it can get prohibitively expensive.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Well, no, I didn't hear. I didn't hear that. I heard Mr. Sterling. There's nothing. There's no sliding scale on your property for this facility. Is that correct?
In terms of one place being advantageous over another?
Yes, something that would be more amenable to you and your wife for the placement in the parkway than is being proposed.
option on the driveway somewhere, another location on their property that might be possible?
We're more than willing to place it within the parkway from their driveway to the corner, as long as we stay 45 feet from the corner and 15 feet from the driveway. And that's kind of where we are.
So maybe they need to see what that looks like in terms of a chart, or if they can understand your possibility here, and if they can feel that that might be a possibility, then I think it would be worth our communication with them on it. I don't know if you heard what he said would possibly be something that would be considered.
Sorry, are we still talking about moving it somewhere else in the park?
Yes, sir.
What the proposal would be for AT&T to, and look, even if this permit's granted, we're going to direct them to work with you on mitigation measures, including the shrubs and the maintenance of the cabinet. What Commissioner Davis is saying is, why not work together with you on the location of the cabinet as well? Am I right?
Absolutely.
Okay. And so it would be, we would issue the permit conditionally on a good faith attempt to find the best location on the property for the facility, including the mitigation measures that have been described already, which is the greenery effect.
I have a photograph of these shrubs that they speak of on a CD cabinet in front of a residential home. I don't know if it's worth somebody taking a look, because the shrubs really
Always.
make. Can I approach you?
Mr. Campos.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the photograph, I think you have another photograph of the same thing, but it's closer up. I mean, if those are the shrubs, I don't know if those are AT&T's shrubs or the owner's shrubs, but they don't, if that's a reasonable comparison, that they don't seem to hide very much. And that looks to be a new cabinet with graffiti on it in front of a residential home. So I think the address is on the back.
It's kind of hard to see them. I don't know.
It's hard to tell if that's part of the walkway there or...
I do know that the plants that we put in are governed by the city as to which we can choose from.
Right, and Mr. Lorenzen, do you know, aren't they put adjacent, immediately adjacent? There's at least several inches between the shrubs and the apparatus. Wouldn't we put it right up against them? The purpose is to cover it.
Ron Lorenzen, Bureau of Street Services. In the photo, it looks like whatever the plants are placed about 18 inches from the box.
Yes.
If you wanted to cover the box, it'd be much more appropriate if they were much closer, if that's your intent.
Those aren't planters, though. Those are shrubs that are put into the ground.
Those shrubs are in the ground, yes,
Yeah.
immediately adjacent to the concrete pad on which the above-ground facility is
Right.
placed.
But AT&T could put planters around the above-ground facility, couldn't they?
Yes.
Yes. The city would allow that, right, Mr. Lorenzen?
Well, the planters, no. The plantings, if they're kept at 36 inches or lower, we would allow.
Plantings, yes.
Yeah, the plantings in the ground, we would allow.
Right. And what the problem here is, that one's on a concrete walkway, isn't it?
It's on a concrete pad.
Yes. This one that we're talking about today is not a concrete path. It's an actual parkway that's not concrete, correct?
Yes, but we have a concrete pad that we mount our cabinet on.
Okay.
Which is what you're seeing here.
So how close can the shrubs get?
Well, I'm not sure what the distance is. I think it's approximately 18 inches from the pad.
So that's about the best. That's about the best anybody's going to get then.
Yeah, that gives the plant a chance to grow, but also allows us access to the sides and the back and the front of our cabinet. We can't cover the cabinet because then we can't access it. And the intent is that as you're driving down the street, the plant grows tall enough that you don't see it.
Right, I get it. So the plant grows. It still grows as an obstacle to the view of the
Yes, sir.
of the above ground facility.
Yes, sir.
Those plants aren't that mature yet.
It appears that way, yes.
Although the graffiti artist found it.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. Commissioner Cinto?
Yeah, President James, I'm going to sort of want to try to see if we can move this forward with the conditions that you state.
Thank you.
Regarding the mitigation with the selection of the shrubs and the responsiveness of any graffiti that might be on there, that those be priorities. And that in balancing the development of our infrastructure, our telecommunication infrastructure for 300 to 500, as well as considering the impact that it has on a neighborhood and a homeowner, we have to balance this as a city and try to move ourselves forward. We can pay attention to both, but move our city forward. So I'm going to move that we, again, deny the appeal as stated in the board report.
So we would be denying the appeal as stated in the board report, but we're granting a conditional permit which requires the applicant here, AT&T, to work with the homeowners, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, regarding the mitigation measures of shrubs that are permitted by the city and the graffiti, whatever the state-of-the-art paint that is available to you, that you use, is to be used here. Regarding, I would only ask Mr. Sterling a favor, really, a request. If this above-ground facility ends up being tagged and you can't get a reasonable response for cleanup, if you would let, what council district is this in, CD4? If you would let Commissioner 4, 6, and 7, Commissioner Rivas know, or Mr. Campos is our executive officer. He can give you his contact information. Let us know, because there are just there's a lot of issues here, obviously, with the time that we've devoted to this hearing that you've raised, that we want to be aware of, and that we ought to be aware of when we're putting these above-ground facilities in neighborhood communities, recognizing that this service is important to the residents of the city of Los Angeles.
Thank you, sir.
So, thank you all, and thank you for your collaboration with the homeowners, and hopefully we'll get whatever the best result possible is. So that's Commissioner Cinto's motion. I second it. Any objection? Without objection, that'll be the order. Any issue sending it forthwith? We'll send it forthwith. Mr. Campos?
So that is just adopting the report as amended to deny the appeal, however, to grant the permit with a condition to require the applicant to work with the property owner to mitigate concerns related to the shrub and also the use of anti-graffiti coating.
Yes.
Did I capture that correctly?
Yes.
Thank you.
And recognizing that if the property owner decides that there's somewhere else on that parkway that works within the ordinance that they would like it moved to, that you all would do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
So we have that on the record. Thank you. Mr. Sterling, thank you for your time and the work that you've put into this. It makes a difference. Appreciate the board. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. So that's the order on number 2. Moving to number 3, this will take me a moment. This item's been continued a couple of times. It will take me a moment to read the agenda into the record. So bear with me. Tree removal, Council District 4, 3935 Hopevale Drive, recommending that the board consider the adopted final initial study and mitigated negative declaration, thank you, Bo, environmental case for a haul route to export of 1,000, hang on a minute, let me read this so it'll make sense to me. Consider the adopted final initial study and mitigated negative declaration, which is, we will call now the final MND. Environmental case ENV 2014-3285, which is transmittal number 9, for a haul route to export 1,680 cubic yards of dirt from the site for the construction of a 2-story single-family dwelling of an approximately 18,000 square foot vacant site and the addendum to the final MND, transmittal number 10, at 3935 Hopedale Drive prior to making a decision on the proposed protected tree removal permit. Number 2, find under the California Public Resources Code Section 21166 and the California Environmental Quality Act, which I will call CEQA, guidelines, Section 15162, on the basis of substantial evidence contained in the whole record, that none of the conditions described in the guidelines, Section 15162, requiring preparation of a subsequent CEQA document exist. 3, adopt the mitigation monitoring program. The mitigation monitoring program is attached as transmittal number 12. 4, which we've discussed in prior hearings. 4, specify that the Urban Forestry Division of the Bureau of Street Services, located at 1149 South Broadway, is custodian of the documents or other material which constitute the record of the proceedings upon which the Board of Public Works decision is based. 5, consider that 3 California black walnut trees were removed before the board hearing for the tree removal request, and therefore would require as mitigation replacement with a total of 28 trees, 4 48-inch box-size coast live oak trees, and 24 15-gallon Southern California black walnut trees on site. That's a 4-to-1. If my math is right, which Mr. Lorenzen will clear up in a moment if I'm wrong, and also whether or not there's an added mitigation measure regarding the size of replacement trees that are being required here. Number 6, review and approve the request for a fee permit to remove 7 California black walnut trees for road paving. Oh, you know what? This goes back down to these. This is all their stuff. They may have wanted to leave this with us. My apologies. Review and approve this request for a fee permit to remove 7 California black walnut trees for road paving, curb and gutter, caissons, and retaining wall for new construction of a single-family residence. Tree replacements are required. Dr. Williams on number 3. Thank you for your patience, sir.
Dr. Tom Williams, LA 32 Neighborhood Council, also associate of the Northeast LA Open or Green Space Group. One of the reasons why we're interested in this particular project is that we have the same problem in Mount Washington, a 32 unit development that has already been set out and everything in a specific plan. But it's a matter as to the trees and what's going to happen. Critical element here is the haul route. And the MND did not consider all of the haul route. That is, not only the staging area for the trucks, but also the entire route down to a fully paved road, because you got a lot of problems in the hillside areas. There's also a matter that, are these the only trees that were known for the site? Because when was the site last sold? We don't know. And one of the issues would be, were any other trees removed? And you have satellite and aerial images that could confirm the actual inventory at the time of sale. So we're quite concerned about it. Within your conditions, you have one that references irrigation for 5 years, but guarantees only for 3 years. So at the end of 3 years, you just ring bark the trees and you don't have to irrigate them anymore. Oh, maybe it should be extended for the irrigation to be part of the bond for a full 5 years. Simple. Then, as to where the plants are going to be replanted someplace else. One of the issues would be get the neighborhood council for the area involved and with the homeowners.
Thank you, Dr. Williams.
Thank you.
On agenda item number 3, Paul Edelman.
How much time do I have, Mr. President?
Thank you for your patience, sir. Good morning.
Sure.
Oh, 2 minutes.
Just 2 minutes, okay.
Yes.
I'm Paul Edelman. I'm the Chief of Natural Resources and Planning for the Mountains Recreation and Conservation Authority. We own the property next door. I think the key thing here is what is the public getting out of this particular mitigation arrangement for the removal of trees, some of which were removed illegally. We think the public is getting a pretty raw deal out of this. The mitigation plan, as the last speaker reiterated, it puts these trees up on a rocky cliff up above the houses where they really don't have a good odds of survival. My qualifications are I've been a biologist in the Santa Monica Mountains for 30 years, and I've headed a restoration crew for 15 years, and feel like there isn't enough before you to suggest a good mitigation plan. It seems to me that the tree ordinance is in disarray, and there's sort of the community is upset with how it's being implemented. This is a case, because there was a violation, I think that you should hold off on this permit until they come up with a mitigation plan that really produces trees in a location that work for the public. There's parkland next door. Doesn't mean they can't build, but at some point we have to kind of just say, hey, wait a minute, let's make the tree ordinance work, make it the responsibility of the people proposing these plans to make something really great, just where everyone say, super, you've done what you've done. That's the MRCA's position is don't grant the permit until there's a tree planting plan that really works, that puts the trees in a place that works physically and benefits the public. I want just two things to add. They say this went through the Mulholland Design Review Board. Just want to make sure that really did happen, because the staff report mentioned that. Whether or not the old street vacation that was approved in 2007 is still valid for this owner, and if the planting plan that they've proposed, which best I can tell is just little clusters of trees up on a cliff.
2 minutes.
If that's consistent with the planting plan approved by the Mulholland Design Review Board.
Thank you, Mr. Edelman.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Sure.
You submitted this letter, correct? I just want to...
Correct.
Okay. Because there are a couple of issues in this letter that you raised that I'm going to raise with the Bureau of Street Services.
Great. Correct. I also did pass out a graphic, a really accurate 2014 topo from the county showing the property boundaries and I think 2-foot contours.
We have both of those.
Okay, great.
All right. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Mr. Jordan, I would ask, and maybe I misunderstood Mr. Edelman. Mr. Edelman indicated that they own the property next door, and it says MRCA property/easements on the one with the solid green, and then the one where there are green boxes. The two pieces of property next door say MRCA easement, and there's the number MRCA easement. Would you describe the difference between ownership of that property and an easement on that property?
I'll be happy to. And since Mr. Edelman's here, I would ask that he come up and correct me if I characterize it incorrectly.
Fair enough.
So my understanding is on the map that shows the larger view of the properties, there are 11 parcels on the sort of east side of Hopevale that are owned in fee simple, so they actually own the property, owned by the Mountains Conservancy Authority. There are 13
and
parcels.
Those are described as MRCA property on this sheet.
Yes,
okay.
Correct. And there are 13 parcels on the generally west side of Hopevale that the MRCA does not own in fee. They own a conservation easement. I don't have any documents concerning the scope of that easement, but in a letter dated July 22nd, 2014 to Ms. Feltus, they specifically described when they were acquiring parcels in this area their decision to not acquire the 13 properties generally to the west of Hopevale. And on the topo map that shows sort of much more detail, those properties, you can see the sort of topmost 2 or 3 that are identified as MRCA easement. So I may have misunderstood Mr. Edelman when he indicated that the MRCA owns the property next door, but based on the information I have, it appears next door they own an easement, and then across the street, and then further to the south, they own the properties.
Is that description correct, Mr. Edelman?
That's correct.
Okay.
Pretty simple across the street, an easement directly.
Got it. Thank you. Mr. Jordan, thank you for the clarification. Ms. Feltus, go ahead. And you've been here a couple of times before. You are not the applicant, correct? No. Okay, and And where is your property adjacent to the subject property?
That's why I bought visual tools.
Right, but you can just give me a couple of words because I'm deciding how much time to give you here.
Oh, okay.
You're next door, you're not next door, you're 2 doors down,
I'm
you're
across
5 doors
the
down.
road,
You're,
and my lot is next door to the property owned by MRCA.
okay, and you're across the street?
My lot is across the street from the developer's lot.
Okay, go ahead, ma'am. So, with what you have, why don't you take 4 minutes and we'll go from there.
I'm Allison Feltus. I'm a homeowner in the Hopevale Canyon, and I vigorously oppose the tree permit approval. Before we get started, I wanted to provide some perspective and clarity on the orientation of the developer's lots in respect to the illegally cut trees in the Hillside Canyon. So I pulled this off of the DBS website. As you can see, this is Hopevale Drive here. Thank you so much. These are the developer's lots here that are on the westerly side of Hopevale. There's a red line here. This part of Hopevale is the paved improved road where there are houses adjoining there. From that red line on, it's all a dirt road or paper street. The 4 lots here that the developer has are on the west side. On the east side, my lot is here. There are other
What's your address?
It's 3926 Hopevale.
Okay, because we have some letters that say that your address is on Pacheco.
Yes, so my house is on Pacheco, and I own a second lot that is upslope to Hopevale.
Okay.
Okay, so my property here abuts Hopevale Drive, the paper road, and across the road are the developer's lots. The trees that were illegally cut were not on the developer's lots, but across the street on this lot here, on my lot. So in taking a look at that, I want to make sure we get an understanding. The applications for permits from the Department of Building and Safety, where there's references to checking tree removal, I think it's in scope for the developer's lots. It did not take into consideration that the developer would actually cross the street and cut trees that are not on his property. What I do believe happened is the developer believed that this property here was encumbered by a roadway easement, which he thinks entitled him to cut
So wait,
down the trees.
excuse me, ma'am. So you're talking about what you believe happened and what he thinks?
Yeah.
Did you speak to him about this?
No, I didn't.
So
Well, I did speak to him, and he told me that when he was told on several occasions that he was trespassing. He told me directly, I don't care, I can do what I want to do.
Okay, go ahead.
I can cut the trees. So what I believe is he believed that the property, this lot, was encumbered by a roadway easement that would give him the entitlement to cut down the trees, and the developer is wrong. There is no roadway easement encumbered on this lot. In fact, I believe there are no roadway easements for this lot right here, and even the MRCA lot. So moving forward on that, the developer didn't have any right then, in the absence of road easements, to cut down any trees, and any consideration to issue permits to cut additional trees, complete the removal of the trees he already cut, violates the rights of property owners who own those lots on the easterly side of Hopevale Drive in that dirt street. Okay? I believe that there's been confusion with respect to the application of permits here and him actually crossing the road and those trees that were illegally cut that he has no ownership in whatsoever. You can put that down. Thank you so much. With that, moving forward, the developer has had a continued pattern of not following the law or instructions by the city. The developer would like you to believe that he's followed this. I've taken a look at the documents that Ms. Shutt had submitted. That's the developer and owner's
4 minutes.
attorney.
You have 1 minute to wrap up, recognizing that we've heard from you in 2 prior hearings.
And all of those permits reflect the developer's lots. It does not reflect the trees in the surrounding area. I also understand that they assumed that there was a B permit issued to begin work. I have questions about that permit and the validity thereof, but let's assume that that permit was valid. He still did not have the right to perform that work. As I understand it, the city requires a pre-construction meeting to be held. And that was confirmed in an email from the city. I have an email from city representatives that affirm that position. Specifically in April 2014, the Department of Urban Forestry wrote, and I quote, "They will have a stop order issued on their permit, which probably has already been done. And we're fully looking into the matter. Bureau of Engineering told me they had no idea this guy would send in a tree contractor to start cutting down trees the next day. Normal process has the applicant having a pre-construction meeting before any work is done." He goes on to say,
when you say he, who? Is that Mr. Tyson?
He, the developer.
No, but you're reading an email from someone.
Yes.
Is that Mr. Tyson?
It's a inspector from Urban Forestry.
Do we have a name? I'm sorry?
Kevin McGee.
Okay, Kevin McGee. Okay. All right. Thank you, ma'am. Mr. Lorenzen, thank you, ma'am. We may have some additional questions for you.
Yeah, because I have other comments.
I'm sorry?
I said, yeah, I have additional comments, so sure.
I'm sure. We've heard from you in the 2 prior hearings. Okay. Mr. Lorenzen?
Good morning, Ron Lorenzen, Bureau of Street Services. I don't want to go over we've kind of gone over all these things before.
This is the 3rd hearing on this.
Okay.
Given all that you've heard, with all the allegations and the emails back and forth, 2 questions, and you can provide a little background, and then we're going to hear from the applicant's representative is here. We have an applicant representative here, correct? Okay. Yes. So, given everything that you've heard in all 3 hearings now, why is 2 things. Number 1, why is the Bureau recommending granting a tree removal permit here? Number 1. And number 2, regarding the, I forget the code section hearing. Is it municipal code section, whatever, Mr. Jordan?
4606.
4606. We deal with lots of codes in this job, so I sometimes will miss some. Regarding this 4606 hearing, so you can talk about those in whichever order you would like, and anything else you want to add, sir.
Surely. Again, Ron Lorenzen, Bureau of Street Services. I have just provided, just for the benefit of the board to see what the conditions were yesterday on this property. I wanted to make sure that I was aware of what I was talking about. What you are seeing in those photographs are the 7 subject trees or stumps in this case. In those photographs, it indicates that
the trees that they're seeking a permit for,
those
some
are
are
the
trees
7
and some
trees
are
or
stumps?
the 7 trees or stumps for
Okay.
which they are subject to this permit request. There are 4 trees still standing according to the photographic evidence that I have seen, that I have provided, as well as 2 obviously stumps and a 3rd stump that actually has regrowth, what I will also call a
regrowth.
Stump. Regrowth, right? So I just wanted to provide that so you can see what it looked like as of yesterday. I had those photos taken yesterday. I was also asked to determine if there was a grading permit issued for this property as of yet. And to the best of our knowledge from our analysis of the Department of Building and Safety's application, they do not have a grading permit, but they have an application still pending with the Department of Building and Safety.
Okay, they have an application pending with DBS.
Correct.
Any indication from DBS why it's still pending? Without speculation?
Yeah, without speculating, that the application is not void yet. So until the developer goes and actually acquires the actual permit, there is no permit. For grading. Until the developer goes to the Department of Building and Safety and acts on the application, there is no actually issued grading permit. Much as in the same way when we have a hearing here, they don't have a permit until the Bureau of Street Services issues the permit.
So if a tree removal permit is granted and they remove the trees, does that affect one way or the other, to your knowledge, whether or not DBS grants this permit that we're talking about, the grading permit?
No, it doesn't.
They'll make
Building
that
and Safety makes
determination
that determination
on their own.
Correct. Correct.
And that determination is not anything that is of our jurisdiction, correct, Mr. Jordan?
That is correct. We have nothing to do at this body with the issuance of grading or building permits.
That is my understanding.
All right, go ahead, sir.
Okay. Now, back to the original question.
Yeah.
When reviewing and analyzing an issue such as this, where we obviously had some trees removed without a permit, that's facts and evidence here,
No doubt.
as well as additional removals relevant to the ordinance. And as Paul, can I call you Paul? Your name is Paul, right? As Paul has indicated, I don't think Paul was actually addressing the ordinance and the ability to remove trees or not if things are done properly, but I think Paul's comments were related to how and where and how many trees were planted, which I will address real quickly too. But
Well,
the
his letter
Bureau
goes
must
into that, but-
evaluate what we have in evidence in light of the actual permit application and what may or may not happen when it comes to the Board of Public Works, among any other things. So we do know that the developer or his agent removed trees sometimes back in 2014. I believe it was April.
And I'm sorry, Ron.
Yes.
As I sit here, and I know this hearing is going to go on for a little while. Street services beyond Mr. Lorenzen, street lighting, sanitation, BOE, feel free to head back to your offices if you would like, or you can stay and listen to the hearing if you would like. But the bureaus that are not relevant to the hearing,
Lance can go too.
It's up to you, sir.
Lance can go too.
Yeah, and so, all right. So go ahead.
All right.
Sorry.
Obvious, and I believe it was the, Ms. Feltus, right? Correct? Ms. Feltus is actually the person who called us back in April 2014, I believe. That is correct? And notified us of those tree removals. At that point, the site was investigated, and nothing has been done on that site since that time.
April of 2014.
April of 2014.
Okay.
So, in analyzing today what we must do, we must decide at the Bureau of Street Services if, first of all, whether or not, I'm trying to put into words what I'm trying to say here, the Bureau must look at what happened and decide what would have happened if that hadn't have happened. In other words, the tree removals, if there were 7 trees still there, as well as if it did happen without a permit, what we should do in light of that. So the Urban Forestry Division actually reviewed this case for quite some time, and Urban Forestry Division, who is the Bureau of Street Services Division, determined that the most appropriate response, since this property is allowed to build, and they have the right to build this home, and the building of the home, according to their plans, would have required the removal of these trees anyway, and the fact that they do have to put in a street for these lots to be built. That requirement is from the Bureau of Engineering, and I realize that they shouldn't have acted on that. The developer should not have acted on that without going through the tree removal permit application process. We fully realize that. But the fact is that the Bureau of Engineering is requiring that street to be put in. Roughly on that photograph that you were looking, it's roughly at the end of the developer's property. At that point, the asphalt surface will end, and it will again become a dirt road or a paper street after that location. So in light of all of those things, the Urban Forestry Division determined that the best way to handle this would be to require a more onerous and egregious replacement. Normally with the black walnut trees, for a couple of reasons. Number one, they're very difficult stock to find in larger sizes. A 15-gallon size black walnut is possible to find, but it's difficult. You can find 5-gallon black walnuts, and 1-gallons are the most common. 1 and 5s are the most common black walnuts that you can find. So when we're replacing black walnuts, we typically replace with a 1-gallon or a 5-gallon now. As Paul has indicated, we have grouped these trees because what we would like to do is replace the resource where we removed it. The Bureau is fully aware.
The grouping create, in your opinion, does the grouping, and you've been with UFD a long time, does the grouping that's raised by the MRCA letter, do you have the same concerns that are referenced in the letter by the grouping of the replacement trees? And what would you do to solve that?
I don't personally have an issue with grouping, although Paul brings some other facts too about the soil, the structure of the soil and the ability of the soil to sustain these. I am not a geologist, and I wouldn't know that, and perhaps that's something that we should look at when we actually say, okay, we'll change the planting plan, or we'll modify the planting plan. Well, let me just finish on the mitigation.
Go ahead.
Then
I'm
we can
sorry.
talk about where or
Yeah.
how that occurs. So the replacement was significantly increased. 4 48-inch box coast live oaks is not the standard, especially with trees that, there were 2 black walnuts that were relatively good size. The rest of the black walnuts, as you can see from the photos, are not very good size. That this is a much larger tree planting replacement than we normally would require. Typically, we would require, as I indicated, 4 5-gallon black walnuts per tree. So the replacement on this, what urban forestry decided to do was to up the replacement. 28 trees is the 4-to-1 standard that the board requires, but the sizes of the trees was significantly increased. So urban forestry made that determination, and then they went to our contractor and had them do a post-fact M&D for the tree removal, which is one of the things that's in front
So
of
you
us.
went to the contractor and required them to do the M&D?
The city has a contractor, a CEQA contractor, that performed the M&D for the Bureau of Street Services. So all of that was done after the fact. Now, as far as the planting goes, as you indicated, I've been doing this a long time, and in landscaping, plants are often grouped together in smaller groups. But if, in fact, the soil or the conditions on that property aren't conducive to that, we'd certainly be willing to look at that. It was also brought forth in the letter that there is an easement and that the Mountain Conservancy does not want to see that blocked. We could certainly work with the developer to ensure that that does not happen, if that, in fact, could happen.
That what does not happen?
Blocking the access that was brought up in the letter. Paul could allude to that a little bit more. And I also talked to council about this too beforehand. And they don't want to block that access. Well, we could plant the trees someplace where they do not do that. Now, as far as planting off-site, as again, Paul has indicated that that might be a wiser way to do this. I don't disagree that that might not be wiser. But when we start to go off property with development and requiring developers to plant trees, it does, I'm not saying it's impossible, but it does present other challenges to getting the trees into the ground. That's why the Bureau would always like to see all the replacements planted on the property from which they've been removed. And again, as far as an urban forestry perspective, it may not be the best perspective. I understand that. But what we're trying to do at the Bureau is to replace the resource where it roughly was in a manner that we know we have some control over. And when we plant off property, even though the developer is required to do that, it becomes much more of an enforcement issue down the road, even with the bond. And by the way, Dr. Williams brought up the fact that the bond is 3 years, which is our typical bonding period. That's why that 3-year period is used. That's a typical engineering bonding period. That's the bonding period that we use at the Bureau of Street Services. A condition of the permit, though, will be to water them for 5 years. The condition of the permit is almost the same as the bond. It's not monetarily guaranteed, but it is a condition of your permit, and much like, use the Crenshaw as an example, it is a legal condition to comply. So there is that 5-year requirement. Their bond would be released at the end of 3 years, though. The bond would be released in 3 years. The condition is a 5-year condition. The Bureau, the board, if they approved it, the condition would be 5 years.
Does the Bureau make, on the 4606 hearing, does the Bureau make that determination as to, because we never heard about this thing until Ms. Feltus raised the issue about the 4606 hearing in the first hearing that we had. Is that something that the Bureau makes a decision on?
Yes, that is correct. The Bureau, as I indicated, the Bureau must look at all
I know
evidence.
the answer to the question. I'm making the record here, but go ahead.
I'll clarify. Looks at all the evidence and decides whether or not that executing 4606 would be the proper avenue to take in any type of a case. UFD decided that wasn't the avenue to take in this case. The word hearing, I think, is where I've heard the word hearing used. This is the hearing. To the Board of Public, to the Urban Forestry Division, this is the hearing, this being what we're doing here right now. There is a hearing if you invoke 4606. There's also a hearing that would occur if that was invoked. But in this case, the Bureau never invoked Section 4606. There would have been a hearing relative to that.
Mr. Jordan, does the city attorney's office have the ability to invoke 4606?
No. Under Section 4600, which includes 4606, the decision to seek the remedies available under 4606, which could include building permit revocation, moratoriums, all of that. The decision to proceed with that is within the discretion of the Bureau of Street Services. If the Bureau of Street Services makes a determination in order to invoke that, then there's a very specific notice process that they trigger. Property owner is advised, notice gets recorded on the property. None of that occurred here because the Bureau made the determination to not invoke that. If they did make that determination, then the Bureau itself would conduct a hearing before a Bureau hearing officer. The property owner, if it wanted to, could then appeal the outcome of that hearing officer hearing to the Board of Public Works, which would act as an appellate body of the administrative hearing conducted by the Bureau of Street Services hearing officer. But again, the Bureau of Street Services, and only the Bureau of Street Services, has the authority to initiate the 4606 administrative hearing process. And if they had done that, then the hearing that Ron is referring to would be conducted by a Bureau hearing officer, not the board.
Okay.
The board would only have the appeal authority.
It could have been appealed here, though.
Correct.
Could have been, yes.
But that didn't happen, Ron, and the reason, I think you already answered the question. The reason that didn't happen is because you said that you look at what the trees would be before the case and after the case. And
correct.
And these trees that were illegally removed were already part of the, subject to the plans of the project.
Correct.
That you've indicated they have a right to build, would have gone anyway, right?
According to the plans as
According to those
shown
plans.
to us.
Okay, so that was the reason for the Bureau's determination that you were not going to invoke 4606.
Correct.
With the application for the tree removal permit, with everything that you've heard, I'm going back to my original question. Can you summarize why the Bureau is recommending that we grant the existing tree removal permit? You discussed the mitigation aspects of it, I got it. But the reason for the recommendation that we, this board, issue a tree removal permit.
Okay. The reason for this permit,
yes,
is for the.
Well, the reason for your recommendation that we grant it.
Yes, correct. For the installation of the road, all of the necessary walls and caissons that must be in place to build this home, as well as the grading of the property to build this home. That is the reason for the removal of these 7 trees, regardless of whether they were there still or not.
All right. Commissioner Repenning?
Hi, Ron. I understand that the replacement trees are bigger than we would normally ask for, but in my opinion, given the illegal removal, and I don't know what your sense of the intentionality of that removal was, and I guess I'd like to hear your thoughts on that, but my instinct is that this is not aggressive enough of a mitigation to account for the fact that there were protected trees illegally removed here. Do you want to speak to the issue of intention? Because
I can't. Obviously, I can't get into whoever took the trees down into their head as to what they would have done. But from what I do know, they had been to the Bureau of Engineering. The Bureau of Engineering had issued a B permit, and they acted, I guess, the next day. I don't know the timeline, but they acted the next day. If I didn't have knowledge of the way the city works, I possibly could have done something like that as well. But I can't act. That's why I'm saying I don't know if there was evidence that there was an intent by the developer to skirt the permit. I don't know.
So your sense is that they were given the permit to build the driveway,
No, they were issued a B permit to install the street.
and so do you think that maybe they thought that that was enough?
Maybe, yes.
Do you think that they were also aware that we require a permit to remove any trees?
I do not know.
Because to me, I'm like, if you're already in our system, you're already working with the city, you're looking at permitting, I could see it the other way as well,
Sure.
which is you should be aware that there's also another permit for tree removals, especially if they're protected trees, native trees. So I would like to, and I hear what you're saying about they would have come out anyway because of our own city requirements for what they're supposed to do on the property. But to me, when I think about what message we're sending to other developers, and we had a case in CD 11 where we talked a lot about what is the message that we want to send here when you take out trees illegally. That was I think a more extreme case, but that it's not that there are consequences, and so I would like to discuss what more we should be asking for. If it doesn't make sense to ask for more trees planted on this property, then is there can we get an off-site planting, or can we get a fine paid to a nonprofit such as City Plants? Ideas.
Okay. Let's go from the back. The last question first.
Recognizing that we also have the applicant here who's going to have an opportunity to speak for himself. Go ahead.
The last question first. As far as a fine goes, for a fine to be instituted in this case, we would have to file a criminal case with the city attorney's office and file a case with the city attorney, who would then decide whether they feel that they should move forward, and they would determine the fine at that point. As far as increasing the mitigation, we certainly can do that. I mean, I'm sorry, not mitigate. Do not mean to use that word. The tree replacement. We certainly could increase the tree replacement. We could conceivably have them plant other places. That's not impossible to do.
Is there room or a need for additional trees on the MRCA property?
I don't know off the top of my head. If you're remember, we're talking easements, we're talking property. If you have the map, you see that they're not the same.
Maybe we'll.
Well, I'd like the applicant to be able to speak for himself here. We've spent a lot of time talking about things, and allegations have been made against him. Sir, as the real property and interest, you've heard me say in the prior hearing, we don't put a time limit on you, but when you start to repeat yourself if necessary, then I'll step in and try to move it along. Although, as you can tell from our agenda this morning, we do like everyone to feel like they've been completely heard. So go ahead, sir.
Okay, let me clarify everything. I got the B permit approved.
I'm sorry?
B permit for the road improvement, yes. I got approved. I did call pre-inspection. By my GPI report, pre-grading inspection, I have to have a pre-grading inspection before I go something else. That's the first thing. So I submit you papers, which is no indication for the tree removal, okay? That's why I have a pre-inspection. I have Inspector Don Harris come to this, and he said, okay, stake it everything, then call me back and let me check your stakes, okay? Next day, he called me, he said, hold on, don't do nothing. Oh, I stake it, and the trees was on a city right away. Nobody told me, hold on one second, nobody told me.
Excuse me for a moment, sir. Ms. Feltus, this is the third hearing that we've heard from you on, and I don't know if you could tell or not, but we have a decorum and respect for other people in this hearing. Nobody from the audience interrupted you in any of your hearings. You've done that a few times today, and I would only request that out of respect for everyone here, that you listen and allow this gentleman to present his case as you were allowed to. I will give you an opportunity to respond, but I'm going to remove that opportunity if I hear another interruption. Go ahead, sir.
About 3-4 days later, the street administration called me and said, Alex, stop the job because we have an issue with the trees. I stopped the job. 4 days later, Ms. Feltes put a fence, chain link fence, on the city property. So the Bureau of Engineering called the survey company, their surveying, and they did the survey which I submitted to you. And you can clearly see where is the trees and where is the fence, okay? It's not by me, it's by the city of Los Angeles, okay? And then the process starts. I submit the application, I submit the arborist review, I didn't touch the property. All of a sudden, 1 week ago or 2 weeks ago, I go to the property and there is no more fence. So if this is her property, why she moved the fence? So basically I don't know what to say. It's 3 years of suffering, thousands of dollars, and there is no end of it. It's like a personal vendetta. I don't understand that. That's it. Nothing else I can say. The thing is, another thing, let me. So I go to the forestry division because to get my building permit, I have to have clearances for all departments, okay? I got the clearances from all departments, and I go to the forestry division, they give me clearance to get my building permit. All of a sudden, 3 days later, they said, no, we don't give you clearance. It's like a game, or I don't understand what's going on with that. And it's 3 years. Thank you.
Sir, could I ask you a question? Can we ask you a couple of questions? Regarding the claim, we've heard a couple of things, and I'm going to do my best to summarize it, and we would like your response if I summarize it accurately. Regarding the claim that trees were illegally removed without a permit, there's the claim that was made that trees were taken out without a permit. I don't think that's been disputed. But the Bureau of Street Services, one, I would want to know if you dispute that. Secondly, the Bureau of Street Services has indicated that within a day or two, after the discovery of the illegal tree removal, there was an approach to the Bureau of Street Services regarding that. When the trees were first taken out, what was the intent on removing the trees?
Like I said, I got a GPI report. Has nothing to do with the trees. The trees located on the city right away, which I have to improve. That's why I have a pre-inspection. And the inspector said, go ahead.
By improve, you mean that's where the Bureau of Engineering is requiring the road improvement?
Yes.
Okay, go ahead.
But the GPI didn't say nothing about the protected trees, not on the road improvement, not on my property. All of a sudden, 2 months later, they said, yes, you need a protected tree permit. So it's like a game, like I said. I don't know where to follow. Original GPI report, which I submitted to you, there is no condition for the tree removals. After 2 months, they send me another GPI report, which says tree removal condition. So I don't know where to go. And the survey, like I said, I cut the tree. I didn't even remove it. I just cut the tree to stake my road, which is inspector required. It's not what I want to do. Till today, I didn't touch the property. Nobody told me it's a protected tree on a city right-of-way or on my property.
I hear you. I would only mention as, and I'm mentioning this for the record. Mm-hmm. So, and this is in the comments that we've received. So, there is backup for, what's your name, sir?
Alex.
What's
Alex Schwartzman.
Okay, for Mr. Schwartzman, that there is, in documents provided by the city, no requirement on approval for trees to be removed. That box is not checked, and then
Yes.
that's correct.
Yes.
And then a couple months later, you get another copy of it, and the box is checked.
Yes.
So, based on this, I understand the confusion. Mr. Lorenzen, any other questions for? I'm going to ask Mr. Lorenzen. It's possible. Mr. Lorenzen, the confusion appears, from what I hear and what I see here, to be at least in good faith. Is that a reason that no 4606 hearing?
Yes, I mean, that's what we had to determine.
So it's possible the city created some confusion for this applicant.
Yes, that's true.
And I think that possibility, that's not the Sullivan Canyon circumstance that in CD 11, where I'm not going to, that's not on our agenda, but where we had misrepresentation from day one on approach to the city versus,
That is correct,
versus an environmental document.
Totally different case.
Yeah. So that given that, what would, and the illegal trees, let's take, for the sake of argument, let's take the illegal tree removal out of it. The other concerns that have been raised, because we have mitigation measures, we're going to discuss in a few minutes whether additional mitigation measures are warranted pursuant to Commissioner Repenning's question, which I completely understand. But for my purposes on deciding whether or not a tree removal permit should be granted, if the illegal tree removal permit, or the illegal tree removal is taken out of it, is there anything at all about this request that is not a standard request that the Bureau considers?
It is a completely standard request, especially in these type of locations in the hills, yes.
Did the MND that was requested by the Bureau subsequently, that has ended up costing this, well, let me ask this question first. Regarding the potential confusion that could have been caused by the city regarding the discrepancy in these two documents, and the confusion around what was illegal or not, mistaken tree removal, it certainly has cost this applicant 2 hearing continuances for me, admittedly, to be able to have a couple of meetings, ask a couple of questions, do some deeper dives into the documents that of 2 or 3 months, maybe 3 or 4 months. Is that what has resulted in this delay from April 2014 to today?
To the best of my knowledge, that's what's caused the delay, yes.
So while we don't have the opportunity to impose a fine on this development, the delay, according to Mr. Alex, I'm sorry, sir, I don't have your last name, the delay has cost him thousands of dollars, which I understand that could have the same effect of a fine. Is there anything else regarding the position of MRCA? Because I think MRCA raises some points in their letter regarding mitigation that we ought to work through.
Sure.
But what I would do is, rather than working through it now, I would ask that the Bureau work with the applicant and whoever Mr. Edelman designates for MRCA, himself or anybody else, to try and solve some of these mitigation issues, and go from there. I've got a concern that maybe Mr. Jordan could chime in on. I've got a concern that if we do anything beyond the Bureau's recommendation, that we are potentially violating an ability to develop a property by right based on previous permits that have been granted by this department.
namely a B permit.
Well, the development permits have not been issued, of course. Building
Well,
and
but the
safety.
development permits, that's an issue that this tree removal permit, according to the applicant, may be related to this tree removal permit. It may or may not be, but that's not for us to decide.
No. The development permits are not before the board.
But you make my point almost, that
well-
if we deny a tree removal permit, are we interfering with what is a property owner's right here?
Well, the board's action here is discretionary. The B permit that's issued regarding the building of the road is still nevertheless subject to the board's giving a discretionary approval for the removal of the trees. So the board and the tree removal ordinance for protected trees does specifically say that removal of protected trees can be allowed when it is necessary for the reasonable development of the property. And building a single-family home on a lot zoned for single-family homes would certainly qualify for reasonable development of property. I'm not sure if I'm quite answering your question, but I'm just trying to lay out what the board's discretion here is, and I do believe it is discretion. If the board chooses to deny a tree removal permit, certainly a property owner, which is then unable to develop its property, could seek legal recourse by saying that I'm not allowed to engage in the reasonable development of my property. Nevertheless, the board does have that discretion, although there's the other issues that flow from that discretion.
Okay. What I'd like to do, if we don't have any, Commissioner Davis, if you have questions, I'll take your questions, and then I'd like to hear Ms. Feltus's response, hear from the council office, and then go from there. Commissioner Davis, you have a question?
I'll wait to hear from Mrs. Feltus' response.
Okay. Ms. Feltus, I indicated that I would give you time to respond. So if anything you'd like to respond to, go right ahead.
And my apologies for interrupting earlier. I just want to make sure we all have full.
Well, I wanted you to know you're going to have a chance to respond. So go ahead.
I just wanted to follow up as to what was in the right-of-way, and I appreciate Mr. Schwartzman's comments and Mr. Lorenzen, but I respectfully disagree. These photos were taken 2 days after the trees were cut, and I don't know if you can see from here, but you can also see where the surveyor had applied markers. This is the dirt road of Hopevale. On the other side is the developer's lots. Here you see the surveyor's markers. The trees are behind it. So I think this is the line of delineation or demarcation of the right-of-way. Why are the trees, which were clearly not in the row, the right-of-way, being cut? You can see the fluorescent stake here. There's another one here, and there's another one hidden here. And I'll zoom in on that as well. Thank you so much. You can see it here. Here's the stakes here. There's another stake here. And behind that are the trees. I'm not trying to stop anyone from developing, but I've been living peacefully here for 22 years, okay? There's a problem if you're putting your stakes down by the people that Mr. Schwartzman or the owner hired to lay out, okay, this is where the delineation of the right-of-way is. Anything behind that is not your property, so why are you cutting the trees down? Now, did he not see the stakes? I don't know. I would think as a seasoned developer, this is kind of, typical hat, just a typical day at work. So that is my frustration. Not only me, but there were 2 other trees cut down next to another homeowner's property, Dr. Feldman, on the same side of the right-of-way. Again, the developer's targeted property is across the road. So that's where I have concern about my rights as a property owner, okay? And if you issue these permits, these tree permits, is he now going to come out and rip the roots out? We've already established by his own stakes that those aren't his trees. So we're now opening a Pandora's box. With the plan for replacement, you want to put 28 trees on the site where the trees were ripped out? This is a huge landslide risk area. A full-blown soil study and geological report has not been conducted on this lot. But I can tell you, almost 20 years ago, another developer cut the same trees down and 30 more on my lot. And I called landscape architects saying, "Whew, well, I'll just call and plant some more trees." There wasn't a single landscape architect who would plant a tree. They said, "We need a full-blown geological report, because if we put in 48-inch trees to replace these and there's a landslide, we don't want the liability." I'm scared now if you have this replacement plan that you want to replace 28, 30 trees with the same idea that a geological report is absent in this solution. Am I now worried about the same type of liability? You know, am I going to get a mudslide that's going to hit my house and neighboring homes in the area? That's what we worry about all the time. So that's why I'm concerned about the cutting of these trees, ripping out roots, replacing them, because we already experience mudslides in the area anytime there's a rainy season.
Thank you, ma'am. Do you have a question, Commissioner Davis?
Yeah, I, after hearing her testimony, think that we need to really get some clarification here. Already it's been presented to us that there has been some confusion in our interpretation with the developer, and yet I'm hearing something different from what has been reported as our accounts versus pictures that she's presenting, where in fact the surveyor had something totally different than what we were just told. So I think we need to do some further research to find out what the real facts are, because we have two sets of facts on the table. One that says that the department told the developer one thing and that a surveyor came, and yet the developer said that it was in the right-of-way, and then yet we see some pictures that tells us something different. So I'm kind of confused on what the facts are.
Okay, anything further? Sir, would you like to respond? Thank you, Ms. Feltus.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Do you want to
and
leave
then
this up?
About the survey,
I'm
I
sorry?
didn't do the survey. The City of Bureau of Engineering did the survey, and they
survey.
indicate, yeah,
Yes.
where is the trees and where is the fence. What kind of paper else I can prove it to you? It's not me. And I advise Mrs. Felton, take your own survey, but they call the City of Engineering. It's nothing else I can do with the survey. It's indicated exactly where is the trees and where is the fence.
Thank you. Mr. Lorenzen?
My stakes is 9 feet away from the right-of-way.
Mr. Lorenzen, anything else you wanted to add? I feel like we're getting into way beyond this tree.
We are, but if you look at the board report does indicate, I think in the recital, second paragraph,
Yes.
that the Bureau of Engineering survey did indicate that the three trees were contained in the public right.
Yes, I know. Yeah. Commissioner Jacinto.
Thank you. Mr. Lorenzen, is there any consideration about the geotechnical or the geological report that replanting trees would be a public safety issue?
I have never heard a geotechnical report being performed for planting trees. If they're not being required to submit a geotech report by building and safety, which evidently they weren't because we don't have it, then I don't see that planting these trees would be that big of an issue. I'd have to look at the grading plan to see where the 48-inch box trees were going to be replaced. Those, I haven't seen the plan, are probably on the pad of the home, not up on the hillside.
Okay. Thank you. And
Let me answer that. I have a approved soil report, and I give you the copy of the approved letter of the soil report.
and that was referenced in the last hearing.
No, the paper what I give you months ago.
No, I know. Yeah, it was in the last hearing. We discussed the soil.
It was in the last hearing, and it's
Yes.
also been submitted.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, we discussed that upstairs, when we were upstairs, yes. Council District 4? Vicky Tavishan?
Good afternoon,
Hard
Commissioners.
for me to read.
Vicky Tavitian from Council District 4. I would like to address the Board of Public Works today and express our concern as well as our constituents' concern about the proposed development and the removal of the protected trees on the 2 lots on the paper street on Hopevale Drive. I think everyone can agree there's some confusion on the location of the 3 trees. I've been told several different things. So I do think
confusion that may have been caused by the city, but go ahead.
Yeah, so I do think, I don't want to delay anyone's time. I know both the applicant, has been going through this process for a long time, and we have constituents that are concerned, so I do want to wrap this issue up. However, I do think we need clarification on whether or not these trees are in the public right-of-way on the developer's lot, and I'm talking about the 3 trees, on the developer's lot or on another property owner's lot.
Mr. Lorenzen, do you know the answer to those questions now?
Excuse me. We'll provide the survey map so we can see this exactly. The public right-of-way is probably not contained all on the developer's property. The public right-of-way is split between the adjacent properties. The properties come together now, and the public right-of-way probably splits that line. Without seeing it, it's not always exactly that way. But, so, actually, that would become a civil issue. If the public right-of-way has to be installed per the B permit, and he's being required to do that as a condition of developing that property, then if in fact the public right-of-way was on the other properties and he is being required to develop it, the property owners don't have anything to say about the improvement of the street. But again, I don't have all of the facts here. But if that was the case, then those adjacent property owners are getting the improvement with no cost. The developer is paying for putting the street in and not causing any cost to the adjacent property owners. The adjacent property owners have use of the public right-of-way, Lance, until that time that the public improvements are put in, correct? And Lance is our contract administrator.
Mr. Oishi, who's here, yes. Okay. All right. So, go ahead, ma'am.
So with what Mr. Lorenzen said, I want to continue. I've gotten numerous emails or received numerous emails and phone calls from constituents in the area.
How many?
Regarding
How many constituents?
7 to 8.
Okay.
All on Hopevale Drive or Pacheco Canyon and Cody Road. Concerned about the removal of the protected trees.
Concerned about what?
Removal of the protected trees. But since that's the item before you today, I do want to focus on that. If it were approved, and I spoke to Mr. Lorenzen about this as well, we would be requesting a condition prohibiting the blocking of access to the public trail and the Santa Monica Conservancy parkland, and that can be done through a prescriptive easement. So we just want to make sure that the community still has access to that trail and parkland, and it's not going to be continuously blocked with construction vehicles or workers' vehicles. I believe it's already in the MND, the posting of the cash bond by the applicant, ensuring the tree survival. We do encourage the applicant and the Bureau of Street Services to work with the Santa Monica Mountains Conservancy to determine the best areas for replanting the trees in regards to the geological conditions.
All right. Is that it for the list from CD4?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Penny, you have a...
Sure. On the one hand, I am sympathetic to the developer given the challenges of working with the city on some of these things. On the other hand, we see a lot of hillside development, primarily because most of the flat part of LA is already developed. So we see a lot of hillside development happening in these times. That is often where the remaining of our native ecosystem exists. And so those areas are very, I think, special and important. And I think that it is just important that we do send a signal that, if you're doing hillside development, you're working in an area with protected trees, you need to know, you need to be very careful about how you do things. And so I would like to see additional tree replacements. It sounds like there may be an opportunity to put those on the MRCA easement. I also support moving this along and, ending the sort of limbo state that the developer and the neighbors have been in. I think it would be great if we could agree to a specific number of additional trees added to the mitigation here today and move on and grant the permit.
Thank you, Commissioner Repenning. I agree with Commissioner Repenning. There's one thing I'm going to do, though, at the request of the council office, which I think is from the request. I think it's a request of the council office, and that is. But I want to say a couple of things first. I am afraid, and just call this prosecutor's instinct, but I'm afraid that there has been some confusion that our city process has laid in the lap of this developer. And that confusion that the record indicates, not conclusively, but there's certainly credible evidence that the city process has confused the developer. It certainly cost the developer and the homeowner, when I say developer, the property owner, their ability to the property that they purchased, that they own, that they have rights on, and to build on, to put a home on, and to enjoy that home. That has been delayed by all kinds of things. And so that said, I would agree with Commissioner Repenning. I think we ought to move this along. However, the council office has requested some additional information and clarification, which I think we should provide to them. I'm going to say, though, that this is the third hearing on this matter, and it's the first time the council office has appeared. So because of that, I think it deserves and I work with CD4 a lot, and work hard to, and appreciate their work in the city. So I think that out of respect for all the parties, and the board and the Bureau, this continuance should be brief. Mr. Lorenzen, I would like for you, the council office listed a number of items that I think they're entitled to, items of clarification. Could you work with the council office to provide that clarification? And whatever you provide to the council office, it would be helpful if you would provide to Mr. Edelman, to Ms. Festus, and to Alex. I'm sorry, sir, I don't have your last name. So that everybody has the same information. And then my question to you is, how much time do you need for us to bring this back for what will be the final hearing on this item?
Unfortunately, I couldn't hear the list that she stated.
Okay, well, she'll get.
So she can give it to me. I unfortunately don't hear very well. So yeah, where are we? Is it Wednesday today?
Could we have Is 2 weeks? With
Next Wednesday?
What?
Next Wednesday?
I was going to say 2 weeks, but Ms. Tavitan. And by the way, just so you know, the conditions that you put on the, I don't know how my colleagues feel, but I would be inclined to support and grant those conditions.
Yeah.
So that may solve some of the council office's issues.
Definitely. So I think we got some clarification on the whether the trees are within the public right-of-way or not, and I'm not sure, are you going to be providing everyone with the survey from the department?
Right. So how much time do you need for that, Mr. Lorenzen? Do you need a week? Do you need 10 days? Do you?
We have that. We probably have that.
Okay. A week from today, Mr. Jordan, you have.
Well, the survey is actually Exhibit 15 in the report.
Understood.
Okay.
But look, I had a lot of stuff in front of me in the report too, and I needed some additional time to digest it.
Okay.
Is a week from today reasonable for you? All right, that gives me time to also to talk to the council member directly, and bring this back to the board.
The only other mitigation that we're asking for is a request to prohibit blocking access to the public trail and the Conservancy parkland. That's the only other thing we're asking for. The cash bond is already part of the MND to ensure the survival of the trees. So if that's something that needs to be worked into their plans, until next week, that's fine.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Anything else?
Thanks.
Yeah, I just wanted to,
Commissioner Davis?
Mr.
I'm sorry, sir?
About the public exit, in my whole route permit, which was approved,
Yes.
I have a condition that I have to keep the road open for the public. It's condition of the whole route permit.
That condition already exists for the
Yes.
whole route permit.
Yes.
And so, hey,
I don't know who is who
understood.
knows what.
Ron, could somebody with Bureau of Street Services speak with Alex to make sure that everything that the council office has asked for, when we come back, either a week from today or 2 weeks from today, whatever it is, we'd like to have this baby wrapped up and the bow on it so we can decide whether we're going to approve it or deny it based on everything in front of us that's clear. Okay. So could...
just to be clear,
yes.
We'll provide the survey map.
Yes.
All right. And I just talked to Paul. The trail to which is being referred is the paper street. So once if this goes forward and they, excuse me, put in the street, Alec will be required to put at the end of that asphalt improvement whatever they're required to put in by the Bureau of... Actually, if you look at the map, you can see that the trail goes onto private property.
Okay.
All right, or your property or whoever's property adjacent. Well, the developer, if this goes forward, the developer can fence their property within the confines of the Department of Building and Safety rules and regulations. They'll build the public right-of-way within the constraints and the requirements of the Bureau of Engineering. So I don't know what blocking that dirt road means. That asphalt road may have a guardrail placed at the end because the Bureau of Engineering may require that. You don't think they will? Okay. I mean, I don't know. So they'll build the road, however, they'll build it to the least of expectation that they have to, so that they don't have to spend more money. So as far as I'm concerned, that the trail will still be open, and the bond's already going to be required. So really, the only thing that we have to provide here is the survey map.
All right. But because of these, like, I would like for your office to communicate with Alex to make sure we're squared away on things.
Okay.
And the council office.
Sure.
Because
we'll
of
be
that,
doing that,
my recommendation would be to put this on March 15th. That's 2 weeks from
2 weeks.
today. That's the hearing date that we're going to hear this thing.
Okay.
And that the property owner is entitled to a vote by this body, one way or the other, so that they can proceed, yes or no, so that they can proceed how they feel they need to proceed. And I would just request, as a courtesy, that the person most knowledgeable, sorry for all the litigation terms here, but this is like a litigation hearing, that the person most
Don't say
knowledgeable from the Bureau of Engineering be present for the hearing.
Oh, the Bureau of Engineering?
Yes.
Okay.
I'd like to have them here as well.
Okay.
Okay?
Thought you were going to say the Bureau of Street Services.
What?
Thought you were going to say me.
Well, that would be you already from the Bureau of Street
I know.
Services, but from the Bureau of Engineering as well. Yes?
Okay, got it.
Additional stuff? Go ahead.
Mr. President, I just want to clarify Commissioner Repenning's request for consideration of a larger mitigation.
Good point.
That we entered as well.
Good point. So Commissioner Sindo makes a good point, which is I'm glad he made a good point because I'm getting anxious. So Commissioner Repenning raised additional mitigation possibilities. During these 2 weeks, could we put in a list of available items that we could consider, and I'd like Mr. Jordan to know about this too, that we could consider for possible mitigation measures, additional mitigation measures that we've already indicated we would do anyway, that the council office has asked for, along the lines of what Commissioner Repenning has requested.
Okay.
Excluding a fine, because I think that the fine issue has occurred because of the 3-year time period. And the requirement that you said that would be to file a criminal case, which I can tell you right now, we don't have a criminal case here when you've got documents from the city that are confusing. To make that list. Anything else?
I just wanted to thank you, Mr. President, for allowing all of the parties involved, and I really mean each and every party that has presented today in this matter. This is a great example, as complex as this case has been, and as many times as we've heard a little bit about it, each time we've discovered something new. And this is a great example of government at work. And I appreciate, including the council office, every presentation on this problem and look forward to seeing it through to its conclusion. But I would be remiss not to thank you for the leadership, as complex as this problem has been, of creating an even avenue for everyone to have their say. So thank you so very much for this, and I think that this is what we expect from city government.
Well, thank you, sir. I would always, as I always do at the end of these hearings, I thank all of the participants. I know that oftentimes everyone leaves upset, sometimes everyone leaves happy, and more often than not, one's upset and the other one's not. So, but I'd always want to thank everyone for the time. I know it's not easy. You take time out of your busy day to come here and to participate in our very important process. Thank you, Mr. Lorenzen, Mr. Campos. Thank you, Ms. Feltus. Vicki, thank you. Mr. Edelman, Alex, thank you. Mr. Campos, and to my colleagues, have we cleared the desk?
Yes, you have. And just for the record, on item number 3 is to be continued to Wednesday, March the 15th, 2017.
Yes. Is Randy Smith still here? Mr. Smith, Randy, we have an adjourning motion. And Randy, would you like to come up and say a few words before I read our adjourning motion into the record? And it's good to see you again, and and I'm sorry you're here under the circumstances that you are, but we have an adjourning motion, and Randy will speak to that, and then I'll close. And let me just thank you before you begin for your patience this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, commissioners, staff. This is a tough situation for me personally, but this may come as a huge shock to you, but I'm here to give kudos to the Street Services Bureau and the Commission. And after the hearing today, I thought maybe I'd throw that in. It's a great honor for Mike to be recognized, and I just want to say thank you. The words are deserved and they're accurate. Mike's desire was to improve the city of Los Angeles in partnership with the city. And any great partnership is, the foundation of it is mutual respect. And I just want to say that the Commission has set a standard of working with us to solve the problems together in a way that has greatly benefited the city. And the way it's been executed by the Street Services Bureau has been, it made Mike's life wonderful to have such wonderful relationships and friends. And I want to personally thank Lance Oishi, what a leader, for the way he solves problems and how we work together. Mike Amati, I want to mention Mike. I want to mention Shannon Eastonson, who is now retired. And we've got Sergio on, new, but off to a great start. And it's just been, I'm speaking on her behalf. And of course, I don't want to leave Ted out because Ted was there from the beginning. And these relationships make a person want to work harder for the city and for the citizens. So I just wanted to say thank you, and I appreciate your patience. Thank you very much.
Randy, thank you, and I enjoyed working with Mike. Mike Friend is her name, and she had a formal association with the city that dates back to the 2010-2011 fiscal year, when she and her business partners responded to an RFP for the city's impending bus bench program. Mike, as she preferred to be called, was one of the co-owners of and the General Counsel for Martin Outdoor Media, LLC, which eventually was selected as the designated contractor for the city's bus bench program. Prior to and after the program's official start date in October 2011, Mike worked closely with the city program management staff to ensure the program was successfully implemented and managed in accordance with our contract. Mike was a thoughtful listener, sharp as a tack, a fierce defender of her company, as she was, and those she was closely associated with, and strategic, intentional, and straightforward in her actions. At the same time, Mike's personality was always positive, warm, friendly, and loving to all the people she met, and a wonderful person to work with, and she was that. In early January of this year, just a couple of months ago, Mike was diagnosed with a form of lung cancer, and unbeknownst to both her and the physicians at that time, it unfortunately turned out to be a particularly aggressive type of cancer. Despite starting different types of therapies to battle the cancer after Mike's initial diagnosis, the cancer continued to quickly spread throughout her body, and on February 15th, 2017, at the young age of 63, Mike passed away. Mike is survived by her loving husband, Randy Smith, and her surrogate family at Martin Outdoor Media, Insight Media, whom she guided, loved, and worked closely with for many years. A part of Mike's past efforts and continuing legacy can be seen and will continue to be seen in the 6,000 bus benches that we now have installed across the city in every council district and neighborhood serving all Angelenos. She will be dearly missed by all those who had a chance to be a part of her life, including city program management staff, which would include myself and, of course, Mr. Oishi as well, and those at the Bureau of Street Services. So, Randy, thank you for your kind words. We're so sorry for your loss. It is the city's loss, and we adjourn in Mike's honor today. So we are adjourned. Thank you.